Yes, checks are going out. It is made official, everybody. New batches of payments are being deposited, as well as mailed out to eligible Americans. Republicans and Democrats are now trying to reach a deal as soon as possible on future relief assistance. The lawmakers insist that aid go out to a more targeted group of people to make sure that everybody gets a stimulus fast. So now, folks, listen to this. 23 million California residents are about to receive tax refunds of as much as $1,000 thanks to one-time stimulus checks that the state has approved. The payments, which will total $9.5 billion, mark the largest of its kind in the state history, and the initiative is called the Middle Class Tax Refund. It comes as inflation nationally has reached historic highs. California did have a record surplus of $97 billion in its finalized budget, but Gavin Newsom said in a statement, "We know it's expensive right now, and California is putting money back into your pocket to help you out. We're sending out refunds worth over $1,000 to help families pay for everything from gas to groceries." So to qualify to receive a payment, you must meet the certain requirements. You must be a resident number 1 of California for 6 months or more in the 2022 tax year and be a current state resident. You must have also filed a 2020 tax return by October and have adjusted a gross income within the required thresholds. And payments for eligible couples, everybody who file jointly, may range from $1,000 to $400. And not only that, everybody, but listen to this. Qualifying individuals may receive $200 to $700. The amount of the checks depends on 2 factors, which is your income and, of course, the number of dependents. And the most generous amount is $1,000. It goes to married couples who file jointly with $150,000 or less in income and a dependent. A couple in the income category will receive $700 if they have no dependents. Don't forget about this. Individual taxpayers with a $75,000 or less in income can get $350,000 as well as everybody. Now, the administration faced at least 4 major lawsuits, and a federal judge will hear the arguments led by Republican states next week. And now at the end of August, Biden announced up to $20,000 of debt relief in federal borrowers making under $125,000 a year. It was a long-anticipated announcement, given the relief was something that the campaign has promised on and the campaign trail has paused on. And now, he had been pushing him for him to enact this ever since. And while some Democrats wanted the president to go even bigger on the loan forgiveness, they lauded the policy as a significant step toward addressing the trillion-dollar student debt crisis. But many Republicans felt otherwise, that in the months leading up to Biden's announcement, they slammed the total broad debt relief unfair and threatened to pursue legal action. So according to Yahoo News, another component of the plan is overlooked, and it's that the education secretary has said that student loan forgiveness gets a lot of attention, but the income-driven repayment process is more exciting. So here's the news about that.
Here to Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, welcome. Very nice meeting you and your family. The administration's fiscal year 23 budget requested a growth in Space Force end strength from 8,400 to 8,600 Guardians. And this committee's version of the NDAA supports that request. The military's emphasis and reliance on global space operations will demand a robust force moving forward. But there are concerns that budgets for the Space Force are expected to flatline in fiscal year 27. So what type of growth do you foresee in the Space Force over the next 5 or 10 years?
Senator, I wouldn't want to comment on any particular numbers. Just haven't had a chance to really dig in and see what appropriate levels would be. However, I can tell you that in my estimation, looking at the readiness of the force, there is substantial capabilities in test and training infrastructure that we need to invest in. If we have exquisite weapon systems, exquisite systems on orbit to provide joint capabilities, but our guardians and our operators don't have the skills, the training, the experience they need to make the most out of those systems, then I feel like we're not really fully combat ready, fully ready to do those critical mission tasks.
What are some examples of those capabilities?
We don't have simulators that allow our operators to practice their tactics against a thinking adversary, even if it's a simulated adversary. We don't have good simulators. We don't have ranges where they can routinely practice their tradecraft. We don't have the ability to link multiple units together so they can practice the coordination that's necessary to do large force employments, if you will. We've just been operating in a benign environment for so long, we didn't need to necessarily have those kinds of capabilities. And so I think over the next few years, we're going to have to look at that and be as specific as we can, but provide that kind of training and experience to our operators.
Yeah, I mean, having the equipment and the capability is one thing. Being able to use it is entirely another. And being able to, simulate operations on a range, operate jointly as well. I imagine that's something that's on the agenda. A simulator and range, that's infrastructure. Is there any other infrastructure capacity that you feel you need?
We're continuing to build and design a more resilient, defendable architecture. As I mentioned, we've operated for years in a benign domain. And so we were focused more on the capabilities of the payloads and how long.
The Biden administration finally has a brand new plan to fight inflation and help the American people. Millions of Americans may get extra $225 stimulus checks under this new stimulus proposal. Millions of people could get millions of Americans could also get additional cash payments of $225 under a new proposal. That comes as red-hot inflation continues and qualifying residents in Indiana may soon see the relief. Indiana's Republican governor is also proposing a plan to send $225 payments to people in the state amid the highest inflation since 1981. By tapping into the state's growing budget surplus. The governor said he will call for a special legislative session before the end of June, so lawmakers can consider and potentially act on a plan that will total $1 billion in budget surpluses. He said Indiana residents have real needs right now during this period of high inflation, from the gas pump to buying groceries, and everyone should benefit from the state's success. The $225 check comes after about 4.3 million of the state's taxpayers began receiving $125 payments last month under the same law. According to the governor's office, if it's approved, each Indiana resident who has filed 2021 taxes would be eligible to now receive a combined total of about $350 in payments. Married couples filing jointly would also receive about $700. The additional deposit will be made to the bank accounts of eligible residents in Indiana who have filed their tax returns. And that's the good news I want to hear from everybody. Now, skyrocketing gas prices is definitely a huge problem for the White House, and while the administration began the month by pivoting heavily toward its economic message, experts say the attempt has so far fallen flat, especially as the national average for a gallon of gas hits a record of $5. Along with inflation, that presents a major political challenge for Biden Democrats going into the midterms. According to a poll this month, 85% of voters say they think inflation is a very serious or somewhat serious problem. In the same poll, 40% of respondents said President Biden has a lot of responsibility for the inflation rate, and 31% said he has some. Energy Secretary has also told CBS News this week that Americans could brace for a rough summer, with the top energy agency predicting fuel prices may not come down to less than $4 a gallon until the fall or winter. Energy Secretary said that there will be some relief on the horizon, but during the summer driving season, it's going to be rough, no doubt about it, because we have such demand and supply mismatch on the global market for oil. The president and his administration have pointed steps they've taken in recent months to try to pump the brakes on rising gas prices. And also, Biden has ordered the release of millions of barrels of oil from the strategic petroleum reserve to boost supply, push for nations to boost production, lifted restrictions on the sale of fuel with higher ethanol content, and promoted renewable energy sources such as EV vehicles and solar power. But the reality is, even as the Biden administration officials acknowledge this, it's the president has little sway over day-to-day gas prices, which are often affected by global supply chains.
Good morning, everyone. We come together at a time of so much activity here. Within the hour or so, my understanding is that the Senate will be taking up the vote on the PACT Act, which honors our pact, our promise to our veterans on the burn pits legislation that was being passed. We're very excited about that. This week generally has been about affordability. Affordability at the kitchen table, affordability at the pump, affordability for America's working families. So I'm very proud that as we gather here right now on the floor, we have legislation that will lower food and fuel costs act. The way we will do that is to lower food costs. Do you believe that Russia is one of the big suppliers of fertilizer in the world? The lower supply of fertilizer, the increased price and demand for it has increased food costs. So we are addressing that in the legislation. Competition is so important in the meat packing industry, and it just simply doesn't exist. So that will also lower meat and poultry costs on the shelf, and therefore at the kitchen table. And the lowering cost for the cheaper, cleaner, unleaded 88. This is a very important issue to many of our members in rural America because much of it exists there, and the average reduction at the pump is about 40 cents. So we're very pleased with that legislation. The vote will come up soon. Again, I would tell you what it does, but you can read it here on the sign.